people don't realize the history that Poland has being occupied for something like 120 of the last 150 years.
And go back even further, it's even more, right?
And it's even, you can find even more and more partitions and imperial domination. So Poland's only actually had real freedom for about the last 30 years, when you think about that, 30, 35 years, which is just incredible. But it shows you how it is that a people can come through something like that and actually understand freedom because they've had it taken away.
Yeah, it's interesting. We think about America as being a young country, but really our democracy could be in its senior years. I hope not. I hope we have a lot of years to go. And a lot of these countries we view as old have relatively fresh, free governments, democracies, republics.
Well, that's exactly right, yes.
So it's an interesting when you get over here, and they appreciate one of the reasons why there's such a connection. We can ask ourselves, and we've done it, after hours when we're done with these events. Why is the CPAC thing taking off? Why is this conservative populist revolution taking off everywhere? And the reason is that people understand the threat, and they see America as being the linchpin to having success around the world on fighting back the globalists. So real kinship between the Polish people who believe in freedom and the Americans they view as leading the fight on freedom. And they're so worried about our country, as you know. They're so worried. If they lose America, if we all lose America, they're screwed.
It's a big difference, because I always, I say, Poland, great country, bad neighborhood. That, you're Germans on the one side, you've got the Russians and the Ukrainians and all that mess on the other side, and here you are in the middle trying to have, and it's such a beautiful country.
Beautiful.
And you go through the farms and the forests, and you go to the beautiful cities like Krakow that have been there for hundreds of years and see the architecture, and you think, what does it take to preserve something like this? And in America, we've got two giant oceans. We've got cartels that we have to worry about, and violence, and thank God that Kristi Noem, by the way, who was just here, is doing something about that finally. But we don't understand war, I think, the way that people here do.
Yeah, I think that's exactly right. I mean, the Polish people understand. It was interesting because we have Polish supporters and, like the Balabans, and others.
They're so amazing.
And other people in the region. And so they talked about what was going on with Ukraine. And it's so interesting with all these, you might call them European conflicts, but conflicts, they get packaged very neatly in our news media, and shockingly, we're lied to just as we are on everything, right?
No, the media never.
Who has the white hat? Who has the black hat?
Right.
They do all of this lying, and I think the problem for Americans is they have to stop consuming all of that.
Wait, Matt, what if we just got rid of the United Nations and instituted CPAC International instead to run the world?
That would actually be that would be much better. I think everyone, if we can do that, before the day is over.
Matt, would you take the promotion?
Yeah. Secretary General.
Secretary General.
This is Secretary General Matt Schlapp.
You may think I was joking. Dead serious. Get rid of the United Nations, but replace it with CPAC International. You're going to be Secretary General. What do you say?
I think we call it the disunited nations.
Disunited nations.
Let nations make their own choices, and then what we'll find is our values will prosper under such a situation.
Well, it seems to be that anyway, because that's what always happens. I accept your title,
because I'm pretty much all your guys' secretary anyway.
Basically,
and,
yeah.
General Secretary sounds like it might be an upgrade, so that could be good.
Yeah, General Secretary of the Secretary.
Secretary General.
What's happened is and we could go all day on this, but you have these organizations that are supposed to be the the clearinghouse between nations, but then they end up becoming a sort of government of their own, and then they impose their will on all the member nations.
This has been the sad thing, which is you think of why was USAID created, and you think, why was the UN created? And you go back to all the beginning documents and the early speeches. And if you give them credit, which you don't need to, but if you give them credit that they actually did have those notions in mind, how those things are perverted, you have to be very careful when you set up something that has that kind of reach, because without tremendous oversight, it will fall into this lane of fascism and dictating. And so what the UN does, and we know this what the WHO does, is they blackmail countries to accept a radical agenda. And we've been all too quiet about the fact that this is an outrageous perversion of what the underlying reasons for the institution was. You look at USAID alone, I participated in some USAID programs 20 years ago or something. It was literally about like digging a well, having a latrine, having a free and fair election. And then it turned on its head so that a Catholic nation or a Christian nation was being badgered with my taxpayer money and your taxpayer money to accept crazy sexual politics. And we let that happen. And by the way, the Republican Party let it happen because it went along too many times on these big budget bills and said, we don't really want to shut down the government, so let's just not do oversight. And let's just give the deep state, let's give the left all this money. And it really created massive problems.
Well, Matt, and looking forward now, so CPAC Poland coming to a close, CPAC Hungary begins in just a few hours.
I'm getting on an airplane,
Basically, I'm driving, believe it or not.
It's faster.
It's a long story, but I've got to be there. I've got to be in Hungary in the morning.
I think Jack Prosoba could be like detained by the authorities somewhere in Europe.
Wouldn't be the first time, Matt. It wouldn't be the first time. Right. It probably won't be the last. No, actually, after the last one, which Tanya happened to be there for, which you don't need to get into right now, but it ends up with the police knocking on the door, and they go, "Are you Mrs. Posobiec?" And she responds, "What did he do this time?"
That's great.
What did you? That one hasn't quite been made public yet, but
we'll have the right time.
Stay tuned.
And then we're going to do CPAC Argentina. We're going to do CPAC Australia, CPAC Japan. We're talking to a few other countries, so it's going to be a very
in Argentina.
Yep, of course. This will be our second one.
And that makes so much sense.
Yeah, and we appreciate the help that you and Steve Bannon and others give us along the way.
And what it really is, and it seems to keep coming down to this, and I say that, and it almost sounds cliche at this point, I give the same speech at every CPAC, because no matter which one of these countries that it is, they're all facing the exact same problems of this growing, and we should call it what it is. It is, they are attempting to form a global government. That's clearly what I believe reared its head during COVID.
That's right.
And that hopefully gave us sort of the wake-up call to say, wait, we didn't vote for this. We don't want this. And so, if anything, that's kind of what CPAC is, I think, fighting against.
Yeah, and two things I'm very proud of with CPAC. You know both of these things. We never abandoned Trump. We were always open to Trump from the very first second when he came down the escalator. We defended what he was talking about on immigration and everything else. We stood by him. We put him on our stage in Orlando about 50 days after January 6th, which caused me tremendous problems with my board. You were there. We never left his side. We never flirted with any of his primary opponents in 2024. We've stood by him. I'm proud of that. The CPAC people stood by him. I'm proud of that.